So some months ago, I did a video about why Europe sucks, and that was the title. Literally, Europe sucks. And today I got a comment on this video. I think it was from a German gentleman, given his last name. And he said, as if America is any better. I mean, he agreed that Europe does have its problems, and he agreed with what I was saying about Europe, but he made the comment asking, is America any better? And that was his argument. Of course, it was a rhetorical question. But he did have a good point. Is America really any better? It is a good, legitimate question. And so I decided it's time yet again for me to do a country sucks video. Name your country sucks video. And today I want to do America sucks. So yesterday, really early this morning, it felt like yesterday, I watched a video on the news, and it was a video of yet another shooting in the United States done by a lone gunman, a lone wolf gunman. And he was in front of a hotel, shooting through the walls of the hotel from the outside, and some poor people, poor innocent people, bystanders, they were driving into the parking lot, minding their own business, thinking, hey, I'm about to go into a hotel. And this lone gunman, this evil individual, walks up to the car and opens fire on the vehicle, shooting two people, and the rest of the people got out of the car and ran away. And it really is terrifying. It's terrifying because here you are in a car thinking, I'm going to go to a hotel, I'm going to relax, I'm going to get a good night's sleep, and some psychopath who looks like he just came out of some horror video game, holding a gun, some kind of assault rifle, and he's got a helmet on, and he's shooting at your car. But this is nothing new in America. This is just another day in America, because I remember watching a video a number of months ago of some guy shooting at random cars from his own house. He had a rifle, and he was just shooting at people as they were driving, minding their own business in their vehicles, just shooting at them. He murdered several people. Some poor guy was driving in his van, and boom, a bullet goes right through his windshield and kills him. And I was trying to remember if this happened in New Mexico or Arizona. I don't remember. And when I searched for it, I forgot where this took place. I don't know the name of the gunman, but I went onto Google and I typed in "man shoots at random cars." And I got numerous stories from the United States of people doing this very exact thing. Somebody takes a gun and just shoots at people as they're driving. And this is the nightmare of the United States. One of the nightmares of the United States. It's one of the evils that is prevalent in the United States. In fact, America is number one in the world when it comes to mass shootings and serial killers. And it always becomes a political issue in the United States. It always becomes a political issue. You have liberals coming out and saying, and they say the same damn thing all the time. Every time this happens, and it happens every year in this country, we have multiple mass shootings in this country every single year. And the liberals will come out and say, it's the guns, it's the guns, it's the guns, it's the guns. Yet, one can easily point to other countries that have a high number of citizens owning firearms. You can go to Switzerland, you can go to Serbia, and you will find plenty of people who own weapons. In fact, Serbia is number 2 in the world for citizen private ownership of firearms. And they don't have mass shootings. Almost everybody in Serbia has a gun. How come you don't have teenagers in Serbia taking their father's rifles from the war in the 1990s, because everybody was enlisted in the military in those days. How come you don't read stories of teenagers just stealing their dad's rifle from the war and just going out to a mall or going out to a school or whatever and just shooting a bunch of people? How come you don't find stories like that? Now, there was a mass shooting in Montenegro a number of weeks ago in which I think like 10 people were murdered or something like that. But that is such a rarity. This is like the first time this has ever happened in Montenegro. And who would have thought in Montenegro, of all places, this could happen? But maybe it's because you have psychopaths in other countries who read about mass shootings in America and they get inspired. In fact, I read about something like this taking place in Finland. I don't remember. I think, this happened in 2007, and there was a guy in Finland who was inspired by the Columbine Massacre that took place back in the 90s, and he decided to get a gun and kill a bunch of people. He murdered 8 people in his school. So psychopaths in other countries are being inspired by America in this regard. It's sickening. It's sickening that America spreads its poison all over the world. And that's another thing. Sodom. America will push other countries to accept Sodom. America will push other countries to accept things like freedom for all types of expression, no matter how deviant it is. You have to accept it all because it's freedom. It's like when Ted Cruz condemned Russia for putting Pussy Riot in prison for mocking the Virgin Mary. And Ted Cruz is like, oh, Russia's against freedom. And I'm thinking, Teddy, you're supposed to be a Christian. And as a Christian, you shouldn't be supporting freedom for such deviancy, for such mockery of Christianity. What the hell is wrong with you? But again, it's the old Cold War bullshit that takes over everything, and it eclipses all things, including religion in this country. So liberals will come out and blame the guns, but the thing is that you have other countries that have very high rates of citizen ownership of firearms, Switzerland, Serbia, etc., and yet you don't have mass shootings like this. You don't have this high rate of mass shootings like we do in America. So I don't really buy into this thing. Now, I will say, though, that there is a fair point from the liberals that says that you have a lot of psychopaths in America, and it's very easy for anybody to get a gun in America. And that's true. You can go to a Walmart and you can get yourself a firearm. The conservative argument is that if you banned all the guns or if you banned assault rifles, criminals will find ways to get them illegally. And that's also true. But what kind of criminals? If I had to guess, the kind of criminals that would buy assault rifles illegally would be people in organized crime and people in street gangs. Now, people in the suburbs, some sadist who lives in the suburbs who hates women, who's mad that he's a virgin or he's an incel or whatever, and wants to get a gun and shoot people, is he really going to go down some alleyway and buy a gun illegally? There's an argument to be made that most likely would not be the case, and most likely these types of people find it are more enabled to get weapons because they can just go to a Walmart and buy something, or they can go to some gun shop and buy something. And there is an argument to be made for that. I will give the liberals that. But nonetheless, you can't just put all the blame on the guns, because you'll read articles from the New York Times that'll come out and say, well, the rates of mental illness in Europe is about the same as in America, but how come there's more mass shootings in America? Oh, it's because of access to weapons. But you can't put everything on the guns. If you have people who are sane, people who are not deviant, people who are just normal folks who don't want to kill people, you don't have to worry about guns. The problem is, in America, we have too many psychopaths here and too many evil people. Conservatives will come out and say that the problem is not guns, the problem is music. They'll say it's like heavy metal music. And I'm not going to blame the music, because, I've listened to a lot of heavy music and I don't want to go kill people. So is it really the music? Well, they'll say it's violent video games. Well, I've been playing video games for most of my life and I have no desire to murder people. Am I really going to blame the video games? Now, you have sick people. Again, we have to look at nuance here. You have very sick and evil and sadistic people who play violent video games, and they fantasize about killing people as they're playing these video games. That is true. But does the game make them that way? No. That's the mistake that conservatives make. They say, oh, it's violent movies. Well, listen, I've watched Silence of the Lambs. I've watched Red Dragon. I've watched Hannibal. I've watched, pretty horrendous films. And I don't like those movies. I watch them because, morbid curiosity. But I don't like those movies. Those are the types of films that you watch them one time and you're done. You don't want to, I love this film. Would those movies make you evil? No. I watched those films and I was like, those films suck. I don't like those movies. They're deviant. But they don't make people deviant. Now, you have deviant people who do watch those movies and they get inspired by them. But did the film make them that way? No. It's like saying, reading Marx's Das Kapital or his Communist Manifesto would make somebody into a communist. You would have to be open to communism for those books to even influence you in any way. So those, books and movies and video games, music, these things really don't change people dramatically. They influence people who are open to whatever they're expressing, to whatever they're conveying. You can't really, and plus, in Europe, they listen to heavy metal music. They listen to all sorts of things. They have all sorts of sick and weird movies. Yet, while there have been some very, very sick murders in Europe and very, very sick serial killers, and that goes without saying, Europe still does not have anywhere near the rate of mass shootings that we have had in the United States. Now, there was Anders Breivik in Norway, but that was like a once in a lifetime thing. That never happened before. But in America, we have Virginia Tech, we have the Columbine Massacre, we have the Las Vegas shooting in which over 60 people were slaughtered. We just had the Uvalde shooting in which children were executed. And Americans, the problem with Americans is that they are so oblivious to how messed up their society is. Americans, and the reason why I say that is because when you bring this topic up with Americans, so many of them will say, yeah, but that happens everywhere. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Tell me, in Spain, is it common to hear stories about people just going into schools and killing kids? Or students going into their campuses and just mowing down their fellow students? No, it doesn't happen. And if it did happen, it's a rarity. Are people in Croatia, is it common to hear that, well, in Croatia, there's like 19 mass shootings every single year, 20 mass shootings every single year? It's not common. Or in India. India's got 1 billion people. Do they have a lot of murder in India? Yes. But do they have these mass shootings? Do they have these sorts of murders in which people are going into schools, going into malls, going into theaters, and just butchering people indiscriminately because they feel like it? In America, we had the Aura Massacre in Colorado. Some guy walked into a theater and just mowed down a bunch of people who were watching Batman. It's sickening. But this has become so common that, your friends will call you up and say, hey, there was a shooting. Oh, that's too bad. As if it's just a common occurrence. This is why I say America sucks. And here's the thing is, in America, we have a whole industry of true crime. True crime is one of the biggest, most popular topics in America. It's one of the most successful book industries in the country. More people are reading true crime than they're reading history. More people are interested in Jeffrey Dahmer and Ted Bundy than they are in what happened in World War II. And most of the time, it's women who are reading these books. Oh, I'm so fascinated by Ted Bundy. Oh, I'm so fascinated by Jeffrey Dahmer. I just want to understand what's going on in their heads. I just want to know. And it's amazing. In the Bible, it says you destroyed the pagan idols, and that's it. You don't talk about it. You're done. The name of Baal, the name of Molech should be scratched from the earth. No, that's it. It's done. Don't talk about it. You destroy the idols. You abolish the satanic rituals, and that's it. It's done. It's over. But in America, we do the exact opposite. We'll arrest Ted Bundy. We'll execute him. But before he gets executed, there's the guy from Focus on the Family interviewing him for an hour. Well, we just want to know what's in his head. What the hell is in his head but evil? You don't need to know that. We all know it's evil. I want to know. I remember I got into a discussion about this with a teacher when I was in high school. I said, I asked her, I've always been a proponent of capital punishment. I asked her, I said, why the hell is Charlie Manson still alive? Why? Why does this guy still need to be alive? And she said, well, it's very important because we have to understand his psychology. How the hell long does it take for you to understand his psychology? Study him for like 6 months or something and then get rid of him. Like, why is that so complicated? You don't need to study this guy for 40 freaking years to understand what's in his flippin' head. It's bullcrap. Oh, we have to understand Jeffrey Dahmer. We have to understand. No, you don't. You don't understand. And here's the thing. You'll never fathom it. If you're a decent human being, you will never fathom why somebody would want to murder another human being and eat them. You'll never fathom it. You will never understand it. You may read about it. You may read details about it, but you will never understand it completely. You will never fathom it completely. Just like when you read about, in the Bible, how the Canaanites would murder their own children for Molech, or how, and this is not in the Protestant Bible, but this is in the Catholic and Eastern Orthodox Bible, in the Book of Wisdom, it talks about how the Canaanites would drink blood and they would eat human flesh. And the Bible doesn't sit there and say, well, let's understand it. The Book of Wisdom says we got rid of these people, we abolished these satanic rituals, and we thank God for allowing us to do so. We thank God for giving us victory over this evil. It doesn't sit there and say, well, let's understand why Canaanites ate people and murdered their children. But in America, we want to understand everything. And here's another thing that I hate about American society, is there will be these people will say, oh, what was done was evil and blah, 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 but we should also have empathy for the murderer because he obviously was going through mental health issues. And I hate this crap so much. Just because you have depression, just because you have bipolar, you're manic depressive, does not mean that you're just going to go on cruise control and murder people. That was a decision that the person made. Listen, my great-grandmother on my Middle Eastern side was manic depressive. She would go down, she would go up. She would go down, she would go up. She wasn't an evil person. When she was in her manic state, she would go on long walks. When she was in her depressed state, she would lay down for a bit. Or she would also just go on a walk to get the energy up. But the idea of her poisoning people or something, that never crossed her mind. It's so sickening how we will express just even an inch of empathy for these murderers. To me, it's just sickening. I condemn it, but I understand why. I saw that you see this crap all the time. You'll see interview with serial killer, right? An interview with a serial killer, interview with a vampire or something. And then it's you'll read the comments, and the comments are always he was so intelligent. He could have been a genius if he didn't kill people. Why are we giving these people an ounce of credibility? Why are we giving them an ounce of compliments? This should not be happening. We should be this guy's evil, get rid of him, that's it. Done. No interviews, no documentaries, no books. But because true crime is a multi-billion-dollar industry, we want to write books on the subject. We want to write books about Ted Bundy and all this crap. And here's another thing about America that I've noticed. It's not just mass shootings that we have a lot of. We've also had a lot of cases of people kidnapping other people and torturing them as if they're owning a little mini concentration camp. The house is a concentration camp, and they're a mini Joseph Mengele. And there are several cases of this in America. You can look at the case of Robert Berdella, who kidnapped, I think, 6 people, all men, or almost all men, I want to say. Regardless, he kidnapped 6 people and would torture them for days, giving them all sorts of sedatives so that they couldn't move or couldn't struggle. Then he would torture them, and he would figure out ways to inflict the most amount of pain while keeping the victim alive. And he kept a very detailed journal of all of his experiments, as if he's a freaking Joseph Mengele. Then we have another case. We have the case of what's his name? David Parker Ray. David Parker Ray kidnapped dozens of women, did all sorts of horrific things to them, tortured them, and then he gave them these chemicals that would erase their memories so that they wouldn't remember what happened. This guy was doing this for decades. It's horrifying that this type of thing has happened in America and probably still happens in the United States. Back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, it was serial killers. But then as you go into the late 90s, into the 2000s, into the 21st century, now it's mass shootings. It's all the same thing. It's all people who want to murder. And in America, the thing about America is that, oh God. See, I sound like I hate America, but I don't. I'm giving you guys the reality of the dark side of this country so that maybe you can become aware of it, so that you don't follow the school of fish who don't realize that they're wet. American society has little to no boundaries. Now, they are boundaries, but there's not enough of them, is what I want to say. So, for example, it's very common in America that you meet somebody who has like two different moms, two stepmoms, or two mothers, biological mother and stepmom, or several fathers, biological father, stepfather, second stepfather. It's actually very rare, and this is just from my own experience, it's actually very rare in America to find somebody who just has their regular father without any other fathers. Very rare to find somebody who was raised by parents who never divorced. Like, it's very rare. This is a very rare thing, which means that there is a lack of shame in American society. There's a lack of shame. There's little to no shame in America. It's all just, well, this is my second marriage, third marriage, fourth marriage, blah, 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 and yada, 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 yada. And is that the cause of school shootings? No, but it is a reflection of a society that lacks shame and also lacks a sense of community. Because when you have a sense of community, then you understand, well, if I get divorced, if we're going to be getting divorced, then we're going to ruin the brains of our children, because, it does mess with children's heads when parents get divorced, especially when they're at a young age. When they're adults, it doesn't really affect them. But when you have children and the parents are divorced and daddy's gone, it messes with their heads. So you have this lack of a sense of community. There's a hyper-individualism in America that is so extreme that it's extreme to a fault. There's a huge problem of isolationism in the United States. Now, does that make an excuse for mass shootings? No, but nonetheless, it is a reflection of a lack of community, a lack of collectivism. Japan has a very strong sense of collectivism, but at the same time, there's a problem with isolationism in Japan. And that's where I think they're called hikikomori. These are young men who just stay in their rooms all the time online watching anime and doing God knows what. And that is the reason why I believe Japan has a very high suicide rate. I think Japan has the second highest suicide rate in the world. So Japan doesn't have a lot of mass shootings. It did have a terrorist attack years ago in which some Buddhist cult put some poisonous gas in a subway. But it doesn't have a problem with mass shootings. But nonetheless, it does have a problem with mass suicide, which is self-murder. So in a sense, there is a lot of murder in Japan, but it's just people murdering themselves. But that just goes to show you that every country does have its problems, and America has its problems, and that's what I'm talking about. So we have a problem with idealizing murderers, no matter how heinous their crimes are. We have a problem also in America with a lack of hatred for the evildoer. Somebody can do the most horrendous of crimes, and you will have people in this country who will defend them. And then you have, on top of that, you have this whole crusade against the death penalty in this country. And the people who are leading these crusades tend to be people of a religious persuasion. They tend to be Catholic, Episcopalian, Jewish. You do have atheists, most definitely, who are against the death penalty. But it's so sickening to see people who claim a religion, and religion is supposed to be about justice and mercy, and without justice, you have no mercy. People who claim to be of a religious persuasion defending the most murderous, the most disgusting of human beings. There is a huge movement within the Catholic Church to abolish the death penalty. And this is led by the Pope himself. This is not some fringe movement in the Catholic Church. This is actually led by the leader of the Catholic Church itself. The Pope has even said that all Catholics must work to abolish the death penalty worldwide, globally. And this is the defending of mass murderers, the defending of cannibals, the defending of rapists, the defending of child rapists. That's what this is. And there's a whole crusade in America to completely get rid of the death penalty. The reality of the death penalty in the United States is that we have a handful of executions that take place in this country every year. I believe last year we only had about 11 executions in this country. And the majority of these executions can be confined to a small number of counties. These counties are within the states of Texas, Oklahoma, and I don't remember, maybe Nebraska, if I'm not mistaken. But really, Texas is the biggest. It's the state that has the most executions. But nonetheless, there aren't really a whole lot of executions that happen in this country. The great majority of people in this country who are in death row don't get executed. They actually die from natural causes: heart failure, diabetes, cancer, etc. Most of them don't get executed. And the reason for this is because of the appeals court, the appellate court. Their lawyers simply just appeal for their client to no end, to the point where their client will just die from a heart attack in prison before they ever see justice. And here we are talking about, the death penalty. We should just get rid of it. Well, the death penalty has been greatly abolished for the most part. It's not really fully implemented in this country. Then they'll say, well, we have to get rid of it because, it doesn't work. It doesn't work as a deterrent. And this is one of the most common arguments against the death penalty, that it does not work as a deterrent because, look, the state of Texas has a high rate of crime and it has a death penalty. The reality is that no state in the United States is actually implementing the death penalty in a serious way. No state in America is imposing the death penalty in a rapid or serious manner. We do it every single year, and it's just a handful of people. Most people who deserve the death penalty aren't getting it. Now, if you want to see a country that, and this is why I find this argument that it's not a deterrent so bad faith, because it's not being implemented to the fullest. If you want to see a country that does have the death penalty and does implement it in a rapid and commonly imposes it, look at Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia implements the death penalty more than most countries in the world, and the murder rate in Saudi Arabia is literally less than 1 per 100,000 people in the country. Saudi Arabia has a high rate of imposing the death penalty, and yet the murder rate is so low. Why isn't Saudi Arabia being used as an argument for the death penalty as a deterrent? If you're a mass murderer, believe me, you know that you can go to the appellate court. Every criminal knows this. Every murderer knows this. The reason why I said that Europe sucks is because there was a guy in Germany who kidnapped a young man, murdered him, a young boy actually, murdered this boy, and then told the parents, if you want to see your son again, give me all this money. Give me like 900 euros and you'll see your son. Of course, the parents forked out the money, and they saw their son in a freaking body bag. What does the government of Germany do? The government of Germany prosecutes the two officers who threatened the criminal with torture if he did not reveal the location of the boy. And those officers, I believe, were demoted. They were and they were told that what they did was unjust and cruel. And the murderer, the child murderer, sat there and complained about how he was about how he endured injustice, how he was treated terribly and unfairly, and he was given that voice. And that's why I said that Europe sucks. Another reason why is because Europeans are so extreme against actual punishment and justice. They're so extreme against the idea of justice that there are people in Europe who want to actually remove life imprisonment. I mean, not just the death penalty. They want to attack the second worst punishment that you can get, which is life in prison. Even the Pope himself has said that the Pope himself has condemned life in prison. Pope John Paul II condemned life imprisonment, and so does Pope Francis. And in fact, they called it the second death penalty. And so this is why I say that Europe sucks. But America also sucks because we really don't implement justice to the fullest. And we have an entire industry that makes these murderers into fascinating people. We have movies like Hannibal that romanticizes these types of murderers and makes them into intellectual, intelligent, artistic people, when the reality is that these people are straight from the lowest depths of hell. So this is why I say that America sucks. And if you look, there have been multiple studies about the rates of mass shootings in this country, and every single study concludes that America has the highest rate of mass shootings in the world. And these studies will differ on how they describe what a mass shooter is, or what a mass shooting is. They all agree that a mass shooting is when somebody goes and murders people in a public setting, and they murder 4 or more people. But there are some disagreements. Can we consider a gang murder in which 4 people are murdered a mass shooting? Some studies do. I don't. I consider a mass shooting to be indiscriminate massacre of people just for the sake of killing. Gang violence is a different thing, because gang members won't go out and target indiscriminately. They'll go out and they'll kill people who are part of rival gangs, or people who messed with their money, people who stole drugs, etc. You can avoid that type of violence simply by not being in a gang, which is not difficult. You don't have to be in a gang. So I don't consider those mass shootings. I just consider that mafia killings, mafia violence, organized crime violence, gang violence, that sort of thing. I agree with the studies that describe or define a mass shooting as indiscriminate killing, not gang violence, which is done purposefully and is done targeting a certain person or certain people. Now, Mexico has a very high rate of gang violence. In fact, the countries that have the highest amount of gun violence in the world are all Spanish-speaking countries, or Portuguese, or one Portuguese-speaking country, which is Brazil. If you look at countries like Nicaragua, Guatemala, El Salvador, these countries have the highest murder rates in the world, and really the highest murder rate by firearms in the world. But most of these murders are gang-related. They're not done indiscriminately. These aren't cases where people are just getting guns and shooting people. Now, there have been cases of cartels murdering people indiscriminately just for fun. And this does happen in Mexico more often than we think. Because the common belief is that cartel violence is done against other cartels, against other gangs, etc. And that is the case, that has been the case for the most part. But every year, it's becoming more and more common for these cartel psychopaths to murder people indiscriminately. And that's because the dynamics of cartels in Mexico have been changing over the decades. But what I mean by that is that it used to be El Chapo. That was the face of Mexican cartels, right? It was organized, it wasn't indiscriminate, and most of the time, they're killing other gang members, or they're killing people that mess with their business. You didn't have to worry about El Chapo's men going into a school and just mowing people down for fun. But as cartels became more pagan, more into witchcraft, Santeria, or into narco cultos, as they call them, you begin to notice the violence becoming more sadistic and more indiscriminate. A great example of this is the San Fernando Massacre, which took place, I want to say, in 2011 or 2012, in which nearly 200 people were butchered. People who weren't in cartels, who weren't connected to cartels, literally just regular folks who were on buses trying to travel to the United States for better lives. The Zetas hijacked the buses, took them to some remote area, and then proceeded to rape all the women that were attractive to them. They were murdering people, and they were dissolving their bodies in acid, and just for fun, just for their own sadistic spectacle, they were literally forcing people to be gladiators. I'm not joking. They gave people baseball bats, and they said, kill each other. And one guy said, I refuse to do this, and they murdered him right there. Well, they said, oh, you can go. You don't have to partake in this. And when the guy turned around, the narco, the sicario, took a baseball bat and beat him over the head until he died. There were some very, very horrific things that took place, and this was done purely indiscriminately, just for some sadistic pleasure. And this is what the narcos do in Mexico. There was one case that happened, I think this took place, I want to say in either Jalisco or Michoacan, in which an officer, a Mexican police officer, intercepted a large truck and wanted to search it. He opened up the back of the truck, and he saw literally hundreds and hundreds of bags of human organs, hearts, etc. And the guy who was driving the truck was taking the organs for organs trafficking. Most of the organs in this truck belonged to women and children, meaning they're literally kidnapping kids and women and murdering them and taking their organs. There was one case in Michoacan some years ago in which a van was intercepted. It belonged to the narco group, the Templarios, the Templars, and this was more of a narco cult because it started out as a religious cult, but it became a religious cartel. And they found literally children in the van, and they also found these ice chests with human hearts in them. And what this cartel was doing was they were kidnapping kids and ripping their hearts out. Because if you wanted to be a high-ranking member in the cult, in this cartel, you have to literally eat the heart of a child to prove your loyalty to the group. Like straight up Satanism. It's straight up satanic. So I'm not saying that America is like the most violent country in the world, or America is the only country where indiscriminate murder happens. It happens in Mexico. And it's more common than we think. But that does not mean that we just say, eat to Mexico, and we just forget about the sicknesses of America. Does this mean that America sucks and other countries are great? And am I going to sit here and start like worshiping Japan because they have anime and Pikachu and Super Smash Brothers and those really nice creamy omelets that open up when you slice them in the... No, I'm not going to do this. Here's the thing. They are psychopaths and murderous people all over the world. Obviously, that goes without saying, right? I don't even have to say that. But because, people get a little bit uptight when you start criticizing their country, I got to mention some things that really go without saying. But one thing that I've noticed, because liberals will blame mental illness. They'll say they'll definitely say conservatives are crazy. But they'll say there's a high rate of mental illness in America. There's a high rate of people who are bipolar or schizophrenic or whatever. But the thing is that in Europe, they also have high rates of mental health issues. I remember when I was in Spain, I hung out with a guy who was on antidepressants. He told me that he was on medication. Now, the guy looked pretty creepy, and I would never stay at his house or anything like that. But nonetheless, it showed me that, hey, there are people in Europe who are on psychiatric medications, and it's actually pretty common in Europe for people to take these meds. But yet, they still don't have the high rates of mass shootings. Because the thing is that you can't blame depression on this. You can't blame people being manic you can't blame people being manic on shootings, mass shootings, and all these things. People who commit these atrocities, who commit these massacres, are pure evil. If you go into a school and execute kids, which is what happened in Uvalde, you're evil. And the thing is that you don't find you don't find these types of atrocities common in Europe today. You don't find it. You don't find, in Spain, they had their 19th mass shooting today. Yeah, some guy went into a school and literally executed toddlers point blank range. But in America, that's common. Now, does that mean that Europe does not have people with murderous desires? Absolutely not. Let's remember what happened in Europe over 70 years ago, over 75 years ago. They had millions of people butchered by the German Reich because the German Reich didn't like certain people. What I have noticed is this. You see, like I said, there's people with murderous desires all over the world. That goes without saying. In Lebanon, they had a horrific massacre that took place in 1982. It's called the Sabra and Shatila massacres, in which Lebanese Catholic nationalists roamed around within Palestinian refugee camps, hunting down and murdering every Palestinian that they could get their hands on, and also committing mass rape. It was like a mini Nanking massacre. And for about 3 days, they were roaming around, hunting down Palestinians and raping Palestinians. And up to 3,000 people were butchered. And you could say, well, that was a war. Yes, but this was after a treaty was signed, and this was after the PLO left Lebanon. So this was purely, the war was over at this point. The PLO was gone. These people were absolutely defenseless. This was not war. This was bloodlust. This was sadism. This was cruelty. This was absolutely diabolical. And it really shows you that in 1982, there were people in Lebanon who had horrific murderous desires, but they were waiting for the opportunity to carry them out. And that's the difference, I want to say, between America and a lot of other countries around the world, especially people in the Middle East and people in Europe. People in Europe, psychopaths in Europe, murderous people in Europe, they wait for the right opportunities. They wait for the right opportunities. Joseph Mengele did not commit his atrocities until he was given the blessing of the state to do so, until he was allowed by the state to do so. Germany did not butcher millions of people until they had the opportunity to do so. So Europeans who want to murder a lot of people, they wait for the opportunity to do it. Americans don't wait. They just do it. This is the biggest difference that I see between murderous people in Europe and murderous people in the United States. This doesn't change the fact that America sucks. America beats the world in school shootings and in serial killers. And for this reason, I say America sucks.